The heavy iron door closed behind Daniel with a deep mechanical thud. The air smelled of rust, dust, and something sharp like ozone. A dim blue light filled the circular arena as the crowd above began to cheer. Thousands of alien faces watched from behind glass panels, some with multiple eyes, others with scales or glowing tendrils. They had come to see one thing: the human die. Daniel stood still, his boots pressing into the cracked sand floor. His wrists were bruised from chains that had only recently been removed. He had been a soldier once, not for fame, not for glory, but for survival. Humanity's colonies were small out here, scattered across the edges of the known galaxy. And sometimes humans wandered into the wrong territory. This time it had been him. He didn't even remember how he'd been captured, only that the ship he was traveling on had been boarded by Veraco's soldiers. They were tall, gray-skinned, and proud, with faces marked by silver tattoos and eyes that glowed faintly. They called themselves conquerors of 100 systems. To them, a human was a curiosity, a relic from a lesser world, and now he was their entertainment. A loud, metallic voice echoed from somewhere above. It spoke in a harsh alien tongue, but a small translator chip near Daniel's ear repeated the message in flat English. "Let the judgment begin. The human prisoner will face the unbeatable champion of Veracos." Daniel looked around. The arena was circular, nearly 50 meters wide, surrounded by high black walls. Dozens of energy lamps hung from above like stars. The air vibrated faintly with power. Then a door on the opposite side opened and the champion entered. For a second, Daniel thought it was a machine. The figure that stepped into the light was covered in dark armor that shimmered like glass soaked in oil. Blue energy lines pulsed across her chest and arms. When she removed her helmet, Daniel realized with surprise that the champion was a woman, or something close to one. Her features were smooth, sculpted, and inhumanly perfect, her skin a pale silver with faint blue veins glowing beneath. Her eyes, sharp and focused, carried no hatred, only quiet purpose. The crowd roared her name, Valira. Valira of the Thousand Duels. Daniel had heard that name. Even among humans who traded in alien space, her legend was whispered. She had fought and defeated entire platoons. No being had ever beaten her in one-on-one combat. To challenge her was to die. She studied Daniel for a long moment, tilting her head slightly. "So this is the one they send," she said in her native language, the translator repeating her words softly in his ear. "A human. You are smaller than I expected?" Daniel gave a dry smile. Sorry to disappoint, she didn't smile back. Her armor plates shifted as she raised her massive sword, almost as long as Daniel's body. The weapon's surface glowed faintly, humming with energy. "I have no wish to kill you," she said, "but if you stand, I will strike." Daniel looked at his own sword, a dented, ordinary piece of steel that had seen better days. He tested its weight and replied, "You might be surprised." A low hum rose from the walls as energy barriers sealed the arena. The signal to begin, Valera moved first. Her strike came faster than lightning. Daniel rolled to the side as the blade carved a deep scar into the sand, sending dust flying. He felt the shockwave through his bones. The second attack came immediately, a sweeping slash that could have cut him in half. He ducked, slid forward, and swung at her leg. His blade hit armor and sparked harmlessly. She barely moved, her expression unreadable. "You are quick," she said. "Thanks," Daniel grunted. "You're heavy." Her eyes narrowed. The next hit came down harder. The impact sent Daniel tumbling backward. His ribs ached, his breathing grew rough, but his mind stayed clear. He had fought faster enemies before, though none this strong. Valira's attacks were not wild. They were perfect. Every movement followed a rhythm. Every step was calculated. Daniel realized she was holding back. She didn't want to kill him instantly. Perhaps she respected the fight, or perhaps she pitied him. That pity annoyed him. As she advanced again, Daniel dropped low and kicked sand into her face. It didn't blind her, but it made her pause, just a heartbeat. He used that second to rush in, striking at her side. His sword met the narrow joint between armor plates. Sparks flew, and blood, dark blue, sprayed across the sand. The crowd gasped. Valira stepped back, hand pressed to her side. She looked down at the wound, small but real. Her eyes met Daniel's, and for the first time there was something human in them. Surprise. "You drew blood," she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He held his sword ready, breathing hard. Valira raised her blade again, slower this time. You fight differently, no rhythm, no pattern. That's because I'm not trained to perform, Daniel said. I'm trained to survive. The next moments were chaos. Flashes of metal, sand flying, energy bursts cutting through the air. Daniel blocked, rolled, countered. He felt his muscles scream, but something inside him refused to give up. Every time he should have fallen, he rose again. Valira's strikes grew heavier, more desperate. She was no longer fighting for show. She was testing him, measuring him, learning. Their blades clashed again and again until both stood panting in the center of the arena. Valira's armor was scratched. Daniel's arm bled from a shallow cut. The crowd had fallen silent. Valira slowly lowered her sword. No one has lasted this long against me, she said quietly. You should not exist. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. I get that a lot. A flicker of amusement touched her face in the smallest of smiles. But above them, the overlords were not pleased. The glass chamber overlooking the arena glowed with red light as their voices echoed through loudspeakers. Finish him, one shouted in the alien tongue. End it, champion. Valira glanced upward, then back at Daniel. Her hand trembled slightly on the sword. If I do not kill you, they will punish me. Daniel looked up at the chamber of spectators. You really take orders from them? They are my rulers. Then maybe they don't deserve a champion like you. Something in his voice made her pause. For years, Valira had fought under command. Every duel was a test, every victory another chain around her name. She had never chosen her battles. But this human, weak, scarred, and half-starved, fought like someone free. She looked down at her sword and then at him again. I will not strike you down, she said. The crowd erupted in angry shouts. The energy field flickered. From the upper stands, a guard fired a plasma bolt, aimed not at Daniel, but at Valira. The beam hit her shoulder and she fell to one knee, armor burning. Daniel didn't think. He ran to her side, catching her before she hit the ground. You're hit. It is nothing, she whispered, trying to rise. He looked up at the guards pouring into the arena. They're coming for both of us. Valira's eyes glowed brighter, a storm of emotion behind them. Then let them come. She tore her sword from the sand and swung. A wave of energy burst from the blade, slamming into the nearest guards and throwing them back. The force rattled the walls, cracking stone and shattering lights. The arena fell into chaos. Daniel helped her stand, his hand supporting her unarmored arm. She was shaking, not from fear but exhaustion. Why did you protect me? He asked. Valira met his eyes. Because you fought with honor. More guards ran in, shouting. Daniel tightened his grip on his sword. We can't win this. Maybe not, she said. But they will remember. Her armor glowed brighter, energy building until the entire arena was bathed in blue light. The guards stopped, shielding their faces. The last thing Daniel saw was Valira whispering a single word in her language, and then everything went white. When he opened his eyes, the arena was empty. Smoke rose from the ground. The doors were blown apart. The guards were gone. Valira lay unconscious beside him. Daniel dropped to one knee, checking her pulse. It was faint but steady. He looked up toward the chamber where the overlords had been. It was silent. They had fled. He stayed with her until the rescue drones arrived, but no one dared come near. Even half dead, the champion of Veracruz was terrifying. They dragged Daniel away soon after, back into the cold cells beneath the arena. But the whispers had already started among the alien soldiers. The human who wounded the unbeatable champion. The man who survived the impossible duel. 3 days later, the guards opened his cell. He expected more torture, another interrogation. Instead, the door opened slowly and light filled the dark room. Valira stood there. Her armor was gone, her wound bandaged, her eyes calm. She walked silently into the cell, and then, to everyone's shock, she knelt. Her sword, the legendary blade of 1,000 duels, she placed at Daniel's feet. No one spoke. The guards stood frozen. Valira raised her head slightly and said, "The war is over for me. I have found my equal." Daniel didn't move. He only stared, trying to understand. The woman who had once ruled the arena now bowed before him, and above them, behind glass, the overlords watched in silence, their expressions dark and fearful. Something had changed in that single moment. The unbreakable chain of obedience that held their champion had finally shattered. The story of the human and the unbeatable champion was only beginning. The guards didn't move for several seconds. None of them had ever seen their champion kneel before anyone, especially not a human prisoner. The silence in the cell felt heavy, like the air itself refused to move. Valira stayed still, her head bowed, her sword lying at Daniel's feet. Daniel stared down at her, unsure if this was some strange trick. "Valira, what are you doing?" She lifted her gaze slowly. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "I am doing what honor demands. You spared me when I was your enemy. You showed mercy when they wanted you to die. I will not raise my blade again, not for them." Daniel didn't know what to say. He looked at the guards watching from the doorway, their hands trembling on their weapons. None dared speak. The champion of Veracruz was sacred to their people. To harm her or contradict her meant death. Finally, Daniel stepped forward and lifted her sword from the ground. It was heavier than he expected, dense and humming with quiet energy. He turned it over in his hands, then offered it back to her. "You don't need to kneel to me." Valira looked at him, then slowly rose to her full height. "No," she said softly, "but I will fight beside you." The guards backed away, whispering in confusion. One ran off to alert the overlords. Daniel could see panic spreading like fire through the fortress. He sighed. "They're not going to like that." "They will have to learn," Valira replied. Moments later, a deep siren echoed through the halls. The walls vibrated as armored soldiers poured into the lower levels. Daniel could hear the voice of the High Commander shouting orders from above. "Seize them both. The champion has betrayed the Empire." Valira turned toward Daniel, calm even in the chaos. "You need to leave this place now, and you?" "I will buy you time." She turned toward the door, her armor materializing piece by piece from thin air. Energy flowed around her body like liquid light. For a moment, Daniel saw what she truly was. More than a warrior, more than a symbol. She was a force of nature forged by centuries of war. "Valira, you don't have to," she interrupted him with a look. "You once said I take orders. Today I choose." The first group of soldiers appeared at the end of the hall. Valira lifted her blade and the ground shook. Her movements were graceful but terrifyingly powerful. The corridor filled with bursts of blue light as her sword sliced through metal, walls and weapons alike. Daniel ran the opposite way, his mind racing. The alarms were deafening now, the entire fortress in uproar. He had no plan, no allies, and no clear way out. But he trusted her. He reached a service tunnel lined with old power conduits and followed it upward. He could still hear the distant sound of battle echoing through the corridors. Every explosion shook dust from the ceiling. He finally emerged in a hangar filled with ships, sleek Veracruz fighters and one larger transport. He ducked behind a stack of crates, scanning for guards. 2 alien pilots were preparing a shuttle. Daniel waited until they turned, then sprinted forward and knocked one unconscious with a quick strike from a wrench. The other tried to shout, but Daniel tackled him before he could reach the alarm. As he sat behind the shuttle's controls, he heard a loud crash from the corridor behind him. The hangar doors exploded inward and Valira stepped through, her armor scorched but unbroken. She looked around the hangar and spotted Daniel in the cockpit. A small smile appeared on her face. "You took my advice." "You didn't leave me much of a choice," Daniel said, starting the engines. "Get in." Valira moved toward the ship, but just then the High Commander's voice boomed from above. "Valira, stop this madness." She turned and saw him standing on the upper platform, surrounded by guards. His long cloak shimmered with gold. "You were created for war," he said. "You are ours. You belong to Veracruz." Valira raised her head. "No, I belong to my own will now." The commander's eyes burned with fury. "Then you are nothing?" He raised a device and pressed a button. For a second, Valira's body convulsed. Blue energy sparks crackled across her armor. She fell to one knee, her face twisted in pain. Daniel jumped out of the shuttle and ran to her. "What's happening?" "They built a control failsafe into my armor," she said, her voice trembling. "They can shut me down like a weapon." Daniel looked up at the commander and shouted, "Stop it!" The commander only laughed. "She is a creation, not a person." Something in Daniel snapped. He raised his blaster, stolen from the shuttle's console, and fired at the platform. The shot struck a power conduit beside the commander, sending a surge of energy through the balcony. The device in his hand shattered and the control signal cut out. Valira gasped and rose again, her strength returning. Her armor glowed fiercely, brighter than before. "You tried to control me," she said to the commander. "Now watch me break your chains." She jumped 10 meters upward in a single leap and landed on the platform. Daniel could only watch as her sword struck once, cutting through the control systems that bound her to the Empire. Sparks rained down like stars. Valira turned to Daniel. "Now we go." He rushed back to the shuttle as she landed beside him. The hangar doors began to close, alarms wailing, but the engines roared to life. The shuttle lifted off, blasting through the narrowing gap and out into the dark skies of Veracruz. The planet's surface stretched below them, mountain ranges glowing with volcanic fire, cities of glass and stone, fleets of warships launching in pursuit. Daniel pulled the shuttle higher. "We're not going to make it far if they send fighters." "They will," Valira said. "But I can help." She reached out, her hand touching the control interface. The systems flickered, then glowed brighter. Her armor's energy synchronized with the ship's reactor, merging seamlessly. "Their machines were built from my design," she said. "Now they will serve me." The shuttle surged forward faster than Daniel thought possible. Behind them, a squadron of Veracruz interceptors followed, firing plasma bolts that streaked through the clouds. Daniel weaved through them, the ship shaking violently. Valira's eyes glowed. She spoke softly in her language, and the ship responded. A shockwave burst from the rear thrusters, scattering the pursuing fighters like leaves in a storm. One by one, they spiraled out of control, crashing into the surface far below. When silence finally returned, Daniel exhaled and slumped in his seat. "Remind me never to make you angry." Valira looked out the window, her expression distant. "I am not angry, only free." They flew for hours until the stars stretched around them like rivers of light. The ship drifted quietly through open space. Daniel looked at her across the cockpit. "So what now?" "You can't go back." "They'll call you a traitor." Valira nodded. "They already have. But I do not regret it. I spent my life fighting for rulers who saw strength as a toy. For the first time, I chose something real." Daniel leaned back. "And what's that?" Her eyes met his. "Honor? Choice. You reminded me of what that means." They traveled in silence for a while. The stars reflected softly against the glass, and the endless darkness of space stretched before them. Eventually, they found a small moon orbiting a dying sun. Its surface was quiet, covered in pale dust and broken rock. They landed there to rest. Valira stood outside the shuttle, her armor dimmed to a soft silver glow. Daniel joined her, watching the thin sunlight fade across the horizon. "You ever wonder what comes next?" he asked. "All the time," she said. "But for now, I am content not to fight." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's a first." Valira looked at him. "You laugh easily, human. Even after war. It's the only thing that keeps us sane." She tilted her head slightly. "Strange species," he laughed. "You have no idea." For a moment, they both stood in silence. The cold wind moved across the barren moon. Above them, the stars burned like distant fires. Valira broke the silence first. "They will come again. The Empire does not forget betrayal." Daniel nodded. "Then we'll be ready." She turned to him, her face calm but her eyes uncertain. "Will you stand with me when they do?" He looked at her, then extended his hand. "You already know the answer." She took his hand slowly, the gesture unfamiliar to her people. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. From that day onward, the galaxy began to whisper again. They spoke of a human who defeated the unbeatable champion, and of a champion who knelt not out of defeat but out of choice. Together they became symbols of something the Veracruz Empire had long forgotten: courage without control, loyalty without chains. Months passed. Across the border worlds, rebellions began to rise. Small colonies that had once feared the Empire now carried banners marked with two symbols, one of a human sword and one of a silver hand. Daniel and Valira led them from the shadows, striking where the Empire was weakest. She taught humans how to fight like Veracruz warriors. He taught Veracruz how to think like free beings. Together they formed what became known as the Accord, an alliance between those who believed power should serve life, not rule it. When the Empire finally sent its grand fleet to crush them, Daniel and Valira stood at the front lines. The sky burned with light as hundreds of ships clashed above a nameless planet. At the heart of the battle, In a single ship surrounded by fire stood the two who had once been enemies. Valira's armor glowed like a star. Daniel gripped the blade she had once placed at his feet. "This is where it ends," he said. She looked at him, calm and proud. "No, human. This is where it begins." The fleet of the Accord surged forward, breaking through the Imperial lines. Valira's voice echoed through every channel, strong and fearless.